Wednesday, March 26, 2025. You are listening to the Daly Dose Sports Podcast, and I am your host, Clint Daly, coming to you from the Mile High City here in Denver, Colorado, and we are back for another week of talking sports with a dose of common sense. Hey, happy Wednesday to you. Hope you've had a great week. Hope you have enjoyed March Madness as it is going on. I hope your week is going well. And I hope you, your family, your friends, you're all staying strong and you're all staying healthy right now. Hey, do not forget, you can still go over to ESPN and go to the ESPN Men's Tournament Challenge. Go there, search for the group named Daly Dose Sports Podcast, and join our group. Submit your picks. I know it's a little late. You can still get in. It is free. The winner at the end that listens to the podcast can get a Daly Dose t-shirt. Hey, I know we're a weekend, like I said, but you can still join a little later into the tournament, and the later picks are worth more anyway. So you could catch up. You might be a little behind, but you can catch up. So go join us. Hey, this week on The Dose, I've actually got a few things I've got to attend to, but never fear, because I've compiled a few Daly Dose top fives from past episodes that are heavily March Madness flavored. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some of the best of the Daly Dose Sports Podcast. Now, as we do every single week, we have got to get to our Daly Dose top five. You know, last week, we briefly discussed the college basketball scandal that is currently surfacing right now. It seems, if you missed it, that coaches at Louisville, Auburn, Arizona, Southern California, and Oklahoma State are being charged not by the NCAA, no, but by the FBI of things like, fraud and conspiracy and the always frightening tax evasion. Yeah, you never want to hear that. Further investigations are still in the works. Miami, South Carolina, and Alabama are being investigated, and there could be more schools that come out yet. These schools were apparently taking money to steer players to certain agents and financial advisors. Now, one of the popular takes on sports talk shows everywhere last week was, hey, everyone's doing it. I know that they got busted, but everybody's doing it. Two problems with that mentality. One, no, they aren't. I will promise you that there are coaches and schools that aren't doing this. And not only are they not doing it, but they're giggling at the ones getting caught. Because as a coach, or you at least suspect the schools that are doing things, let's say, a little bit sketchy. Like, we knew it at the high school level. You suddenly just got 5 brand new superstar players. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing coincidence. And second, it doesn't matter if other schools were doing it. Try spinning that with the cop that pulls you over for speeding. Hey, I clocked you at 71 and a 55. Well, yeah, but everybody was doing it. Okay, well, here's your ticket. This story is still kind of taking shape. It's still coming out. It may be a long time coming. We could see other programs coming out, other coaches coming out. But you know what? This actually isn't the first time we've seen a scandal take place in the world of college basketball. College basketball officially begins practice in less than 2 weeks. So I realize it's not college basketball season just yet. But right now, we are going to count down the top 5 college basketball scandals of all time. And I'm telling you right now, they are scandalous. Number 5 on our list. The Kentucky Wildcats men's basketball program, it is easily one of the most decorated in college hoops history. But the late 80s? Yeah, they were memorable for a little bit of a different reason. First, it was top recruit Eric Manuel, who had an excellent freshman season. But then the NCAA started looking at his ACT scores. He scored a passing 23. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that Eric Manuel had the exact same answers word for word on 211 out of his 219 answers as the guy sitting next to him. Yeah, that probably won't set off any alarms, will it? The NCAA would eventually ban Manuel from competing. That wasn't all, because then there was Los Angeles recruit Chris Mills. He had a package from a prominent Kentucky booster as the Wildcats were in the process of trying to get him to sign his letter of intent. The package broke open and 20 $50 bills spilled out. So after a solid freshman season, Mills was deemed ineligible and would end up transferring to Arizona. Kentucky would be banned from participating in the postseason for 2 seasons. And you'll remember that was at the time Rick Pitino came on the scene had to deal with some of that, got them going, and then Kentucky didn't miss the postseason tournament for like 2 decades. But back in the late 80s, yeah, Kentucky was in some serious trouble. Number 4 on our list. This one has been pretty publicized in the ESPN 30 for 30 Playing for the Mob. And if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas about the mobster Henry Hill, then you're at least a little familiar with this story. In 1978, Boston College was favored to beat Providence by 6 or 7 points. Henry Hill and his group of mobsters got to a few Boston College basketball players and convinced them to keep the score close. In return, they would get some cash, and they would get even more cash if they actually lived up to it and kept the games close. That trial run against Providence, failed miserably. Boston College won by 19. The mobsters were not too pleased, and they warned center Rick Kuhn and Jim Sweeney that they're not going to be able to play basketball with broken hands.
Man, that's just mean.
Now, they say they also approached leading scorer Ernie Cobb, but it looks like he never participated. Boston College was reportedly shaving points in 9 different games. It was all uncovered when Henry Hill was arrested in 1980. He turned evidence against his fellow gangsters in return for immunity on a drug charge. Center Rick Kuhn, he was actually sentenced to 10 years in prison, with Sweeney and Cobb both being acquitted. See, now this is what the current dirty coaches have to worry about. In this deal that's going on right now, deals are going to be made. Other coaches might be outed because if you tell me I'm going to give you a little bit of immunity, if you'll tell us some other coaches you knew were involved, we could see some prison musical chairs. And who is going to end up not having a seat? Somebody's going to turn someone else in. It's all coming. There are a number of coaches that should be very, very nervous right now. Number 3 on our list. In February of 1951, the Sporting News named Long Island University guard Sherman White their National Player of the Year. He averaged 27 points a game. And then the very next day, White was arrested in connection with a point-shaving scandal that involved not just his school, 7 different universities. Because it seems that City College of New York, New York University, Long Island University, Manhattan College, Bradley University in Illinois, the University of Toledo, and yes, the University of Kentucky all had players involved in the world of organized crime. They were all shaving points. In all, 32 players from 7 different colleges admitted to taking bribes between 1947 and 1950 to fix 86 games in 17 different states. 2 players went to jail. 1 coach was banned. There's actually a great HBO documentary about this scandal called City Dump, if you'd like to learn more about it. Kentucky was forced to cancel a full season. And you might notice that none of those other schools, they barely even compete in basketball anymore. It's not an accident. It's because of the scandal that took place back in the 50s. That's number 3 on our list. Number 2, as big as the 50s point shaving scandal was, another one came that was actually bigger. In 1961, organized crime got involved again. This one was actually insane. Some of the same mobsters involved in the 50s were involved in this one, but this one was so much bigger. Jack Molinas was a former NBA player turned bookie. He had been banned for betting games, and he would eventually be found guilty of bribing players to fix games from 57 to 61. See, it seems our boy Jack Molinas, he was involved in a gambling scandal that involved 37 different players from 22 different schools, including Utah, Bowling Green, Alabama, and College of the Pacific, who all testified against Molinas in court. The worst part about this whole thing was that New York basketball legend Connie Hawkins was kind of implicated because of the fact he had borrowed $250 from Molinas, even though he was never convicted of anything, and there was never anything that made it look like he was really involved in any kind of point shaving. Hawkins was an incredible talent. They were comparing him to Julius Erving. But after this, he always carried that tarnish. He was blackballed from college and from the NBA. He played in the ABL and the ABA, and he was amazing in each league. He finally had to sue the NBA to get into the league. He put together a solid career. But he had been shorted his best playing years. Meanwhile, Molinas was sentenced to 10 to 15 years, and he got out in just 5. But in 1975, Jack Molinas was the victim of a bullet to the head murder in the backyard of his Hollywood Hills home. Widely assumed, it's probably a mob hit. What's the old saying? If you starve with the lion starves last. So what could be number 1 on the biggest college basketball scandals of all time here on our Daily Dose Top 5? It's an ugly one. I'll tell you that right now. In the summer of 2003, Baylor basketball had one of the most disturbing scandals in NCAA history. Let's see. You had a coach who was paying the tuition of 2 players because he was already over his scholarship limit. And then when he was questioned as to how the players were in school, he told investigators the kids were probably drug dealers. Wait, it gets worse, because it also seems that one of those players had been murdered by a teammate 2 months prior. Baylor forward Carlton Dotson had been practicing with firearms in the summer of 2003 because he was off his medication, and he thought people were out to get him because he was, in fact, Jesus.
Great Odin's Raven!
Not making this up. You can check. When he and teammate Patrick Dennehy got into an argument, Dotson shot and killed Dennehy. Dotson buried the body in a gravel pit, and Dennehy was listed as a missing person. Dotson would later confess to the murder, and he would be sentenced to 35 years in prison. Then, when head coach Dave Bliss was questioned as to why he had players on his roster that were having their education paid for, but not on scholarship, Dave Bliss told NCAA investigators that Dennehy was probably selling drugs to pay his way.
You stay classy.
Bliss would eventually resign, and the NCAA would find Baylor guilty of everything from improper payments to drug use, and they would place Baylor on probation and restriction for 7 seasons. It was as close as the death penalty as any school has been since SMU. And it took Baylor until 2008 just to have another winning season. We're seeing another scandal take place right now, and it's very interesting to me that in this most recent scandal we're watching unfold, there seems to be kind of one thing. Everyone looks at the kids and says, oh, these kids always have their hands out. And maybe this will lead to some sort of major changes in the way college athletics operate. Well, first off, these kind of scandals have been going on since the 50s, and it hasn't really changed much of anything yet. And I know that everyone wants to start paying players, but that is a huge can of worms to open. And these colleges are making billions of dollars. They're not going to give that away anytime soon. Second, kids don't change. The kids today are no different from the kids back in the 50s. They're college kids. They're broke. Of course they have their hand out. But did you notice how in every one of these scandals, including the one today, it isn't the kids that make these things happen. It's the adults. The adults are the ones turning the wheels. Yes, these college kids want to be paid. They're broke. They're trying to help their families or whatever. They're trying to get their career going. But what's Rick Pitino's excuse? He's got money. He has tons of money. He's one of the smartest college coaches of all time. I will say this, Rick Pitino might be one of the best X's and O's guys ever in college basketball. Yet here he is, involved in this mess up to his ears, and I don't want to hear about how Rick Pitino didn't know about it. If he didn't know about it, then fire him for not knowing because he should have known about it. Hey, kids don't change. It's the adults that have to put a stop to it. It's the adults that have to educate these kids. They are making mistakes that are going to haunt them for the rest of their lives. And once again, it's the adults that aren't doing their jobs. Now, as we do every week, we need to get to our Daily Dose Top 5. Yes, the college basketball season is winding down quickly as we move toward the NCAA tournament. We'll see who ends up winning that tournament, but let's all be honest. College players have other goals in mind. They're all hoping for one thing. And as much as we want to tell ourselves, oh, they just want to win a championship, that's probably not their ultimate goal, is it? Not for most players. They want another thing. They want to go to the league, to play in the NBA, to get paid to play basketball. So today, our Daily Dose Top 5 is going to take a look at a different type of success in the college basketball world, and that is this. Which programs are actually generating the most NBA players? We think of the top teams in college basketball. Who is getting their players paid?
What?
No, I'm not talking about at the university. I'm talking about after they leave. Today, we count down the top 5 colleges with the most NBA players in history. Starting off at number 5. And we go to a place that might not be the birthplace of basketball, but it does have a very, very rich history. Because keep in mind that James Naismith himself coached at the University of Kansas. Later, we would see Fog Allen on the bench, who, by the way, had an assistant by the name of Dean Smith on his bench also. Then we had Larry Brown, we had Roy Williams, and now we have Bill Self. And who knows if Bill Self is going to get that program in trouble. But the Kansas Jayhawks have produced 76 NBA players, and they have had some good ones. Guys like Wilt Chamberlain and Paul Pierce and Danny Manning and Joel Embiid and Jacques Vaughn. How in the world has that happened? In the middle of like nowhere, Lawrence, Kansas. Well, I would think the fact that they've had some great coaches must have a lot to do with it. And I will say this, I have been to Kansas. That place supports their basketball program like no other. They are crazy back there. They might not have much in Kansas. They have basketball and they love it. Kansas has won 3 national titles. They have a great fan base. Kansas comes in at number 5 on our list with 76 players going on to the NBA. We move on to number 4. And we get to a team that you might have actually thought would be a little bit higher. But the Duke Blue Devils don't always have the most NBA players, as proven right here. The Blue Devils come in 4th with 81 NBA players, a ton of whom have come under current coach and resident grumpy old man Mike Krzyzewski. But Duke does have quite the illustrious history, which is pretty amazing when you think about this. When you think about college enrollment, Duke's is only about 15,000 students. Compare that to, say, Kansas. They're at almost 30,000. Compare that to, say, Texas A&M, who is at almost 70,000 students. Duke has a pretty small pool to pull from, but Duke has had some greats as well. Think back to guys like Shane Battier and Johnny Dawkins, Danny Ferry, Mike Jaminski, Art Heyman, Grant Hill, Christian Laettner, Elton Brand, Kyrie Irving, I guess has to go on this list, JJ Redick, and of course, the latest, Zion Williamson. Not bad for a small school that only has about 15,000 students in their current enrollment. Duke comes in at number 4. We move on to number 3. And we move on to a program that annoys our number 4 entry more than anyone. Because while Duke may have swept the series this year, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has sent more players to the professional level. They come in 3rd with 94 players. And hey, not only does North Carolina have quantity, but wow, they have quality too. You think back to guys like Michael Jordan.
Who?
Yes, Phil Ford, James Worthy, Charlie Scott, Sam Perkins, Vince Carter, Bob McAdoo, Bobby Jones, Jerry Stackhouse, Antoine Jameson. The Tar Heels have had some greats on their list. North Carolina comes in at number 3. We jump up to number 2. And yes, we realize that their prime is probably behind them. But you just know the UCLA Bruins had to be on this list. Hey, the run that UCLA went on from about 63 until about 75, it's never going to be matched. John Wooden ran off 10 championships in that era. Yes, I know it was a different era, but the Bruins have also had some monsters that went on to great success in the NBA. UCLA has sent 98 players to the pros, including, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Jamal Wilkes, Aaron Aflalo. What about Russell Westbrook, Reggie Miller, Baron Davis, Marquez Johnson, Lonzo Ball, Gail Goodrich, Henry Bibby, Walt Hazard, Kevin Love, and Sidney Wicks. That's a pretty good collection of talent there. UCLA comes in at number 2. So, which college basketball program has sent the most players from its halls to the NBA court? And we've already touched on some big time programs, but this one tops them all. And you know, the crazy thing is, this school is still doing it every single year. Because the Kentucky Wildcats have sent 111 players to the NBA. And I'm telling you, they're going to be doing it again this summer. In fact, these days, head coach John Calipari, he actually goes to the NBA draft to celebrate with his players. Well, and also to be seen by all of the recruits that he's trying to pull to Lexington. But the Kentucky Wildcats have an impressive list. Louis Dampier, Cliff Hagan, Dan Issel, Kenny Walker, Sam Bowie, DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, Tony Delk, Jamal Mashburn, Ron Mercer, Tayshaun Prince, Mel Turpin, Karl Anthony Towns, Rajon Rondo, Antoine Walker, John Wall. There are a ton of talented players that have come out of Kentucky. Kentucky tops our list of colleges sending players on to the NBA. Like I said, I know people are down on this year's class of college players going to the NBA. But I just bet that after March Madness, we're going to start hearing more hype for a few of these players with the NBA draft coming up, because every single year in March Madness, not only do we see upsets, not only do we see buzzer beaters, we also find stars in this tournament every year. Guys that we didn't know, that all of a sudden we're going, that guy's going to be a top 5 pick. It's going to happen again this year. It happens every year. Now, as we do so many weeks, not every week, but like a lot of weeks, we need to get over to our Daily Dose Top 5. Hey, Selection Sunday for the NCAA men's basketball tournament is this Sunday. And recently, we have actually seen some of the top teams begin to stumble. And it's a little bit tough because you start playing teams in your own conference. They know you really well. They call out your plays before you do, and it just makes it tough to get wins late. I mean, Michigan got blown out by Illinois. They got beat by Michigan State. Baylor lost to Kansas. Illinois lost to Michigan State too. Iowa lost to Michigan. A lot of this is just teams beating each other up. West Virginia lost to Oklahoma State. Ohio State lost 4 games in a row recently. And even Alabama lost to Arkansas. There is a ton of shuffling going on right now in the top 10 recently. But there's one team that is not stumbling. And that is the number 1 Gonzaga Bulldogs. The Zags are cruising. They should make it through the West Coast tournament and into March Madness undefeated, and they should do it relatively easily. The Gonzaga Bulldogs are without a doubt going to be the team to beat this year in March Madness. But hey, we know crazy things happen in March Madness. And having a favorite, having a top seed stumble in the tournament, yeah, it happens. In fact, it happens often. Today, our Daily Dose Top 5 is counting down the top 5 times we had a heavy favorite that slipped up and didn't get the championship that we all thought they would. Let's see what 5 teams could be on our list today. We start off at number 5. And we start off with a team that ended up getting a reputation for kind of coming up short in these big games. But remember, this team didn't just have 2 future NBA players on it. It had 2 future NBA Hall of Fame players on it. Because in 1983, the Houston Cougars were absolutely loaded. Phi Slamma Jamma had Akeem Olajuwon. They also had Clyde Drexler. They had Benny Anders. They had Michael Young. They had Rob Williams. They had Eric Davis. Phi Slamma Jamma was absolutely loaded. And the Cougars were making the second of their 3 straight Final Four appearances in 1983. Now, most experts agreed when Houston made it to the Final Four and they beat Louisville in that Final Four, well, that was basically the national championship game. I mean, the other national semifinal, that was between North Carolina State and Georgia. Who cares? That was like a battle for third because we all know Louisville and Houston were really the 2 big dogs of the year. Yeah, except North Carolina State and head coach Jim Valvano, they had other ideas. The Wolfpack would steal a 54-52 win in the championship game as Lorenzo Charles grabbed Derek Whittenberg's shot and flushed it through the rim at the buzzer. And I will always believe that Houston head coach Guy Lewis kind of just got outcoached by Jimmy V. He kind of outcoached himself a little bit too, because Guy Lewis always preached that we go out and we play this high-flying style. We press. We have wide open attack. We just score and score and score. But then if a game ever got tight, he would kind of panic. And he would kind of try to slow things down and take a ton of time off the clock. And as a result, Houston got beat by a North Carolina State team that probably shouldn't have beat him. Houston went down and came up short. And they come in today on our list at number 5. We move next to number 4. And we reach a team that has won the big game a few times. But for a few years there, they really had a streak going of always losing. And it seemed like they always lose to like a lesser opponent in the tournament. They had a great coach in Roy Williams. They had a ton of talented players. So what kept tripping up the Kansas Jayhawks? We go back to 1997 for our number 4 entry. And the Kansas Jayhawks were loaded. It looked like they were finally going to win it all for old Roy. Hey, they had all of the talent. Paul Pierce, Rafe LaFrance, Jared Haas, Scott Pollard, Jacques Vaughn. Show me a weakness on this Jayhawks team. It didn't have one. They rolled through the season and into the tournament. They had a 34-1 record. Next up for Kansas was another team that always seemed to fall short in the dance. But in 1997, the Arizona Wildcats were a little different because Miles Simon and Mike Bibby and Jason Terry and Michael Dickerson, they just kind of seemed like a team that would not be denied. They would find a way to beat you. The Arizona Wildcats scraped past Kansas 85-82 in the Final Four to send the Jayhawks home, even though the Jayhawks might have been the most talented team in 1997. Kansas would have to wait another 30 years to win a title. And today, the 97 Kansas Jayhawks come in on our list at number 4. We move on to number 3. And we get to a team that we actually have our choice between 2 different years. But I believe this squad that I'm going to pick here at number 3 was actually a little bit better. Imagine a little Catholic school from Washington, D.C. becoming a household name and having the coolest gear you could own on the street. You want street cred? You wore something that said Georgetown Hoyas on it back in the 80s. Because Big John Thompson found tough kids that showed no emotions and would fight you as soon as play you and play tough defense. They would beat you up physically and they dared you to fight back. And in 1985, Hoya paranoia was in full effect. Georgetown had Patrick Ewing. They had David Wingate and Reggie Williams and Michael Jackson, and they had just won the championship the previous season. No way anyone is going to hang with Georgetown in 85. So Georgetown rolled to a 35-2 record, while I might add, playing in the Big East Conference, the nastiest conference in the country at the time. But here's the problem for Georgetown. In the final, they ran into a team that just knew them so well. Because the Hoyas had already played Villanova in conference play twice. They had beaten them both times. One time by 7, one time by 2. But here's the thing. Villanova knew Georgetown. Other teams might have been afraid of Georgetown. Villanova wasn't afraid of them. But Villanova also didn't have the talent that Georgetown had. I mean, it would take a perfect game to beat Georgetown in 85, right? So Villanova went out and played about as close to a perfect game as you could. Villanova made 22 of 28 shots from the field. They shot 22 of 27 at the free throw line. It took almost a perfect game to beat the Georgetown Hoyas in 1985. And somehow, the Villanova Wildcats played one and took them out and sent them home. Next up at number 2, we go clear back to 1975. And this team coming in at number 2 was great. They had kind of a tough break, literally. And they would prove how great they were eventually. Head coach Bob Knight led the Indiana Hoosiers that had Quinn Buckner and Scott May and Kent Benson and Steve Green and Bobby Wilkerson to a 31-0 record, and they plowed through the Big Ten undefeated. But then, in the final game of the season against Purdue, Scott May broke his arm. And the Hoosiers hit the big dance, and everyone was saying, well, maybe they won't be quite as good. But then they played their first 2 games, and they beat Texas El Paso and Oregon State by a combined 35 points. Okay, well, maybe Indiana's still going to be good. But then they ran into Kentucky, and the loss of Scott May turned out to be a major problem. Kentucky shot almost 50% from the field, and Indiana got sent home early as they get knocked out by Kentucky. Now, I'll give Indiana this. They would come back the following season, and they would go 32-0 on their way to a title. And they are the last team to win it all going undefeated. That was in 76. But in 75, the Indiana Hoosiers come up a little short. and they come in today at our list at number 2. We reach our number 1 team on our list of heavy favorites that came up a little short in March Madness. And I mean, who else could it be? It is one of the biggest upsets in NCAA tournament history, but it does have some disturbing similarities to this year. In 1991, the UNLV Runnin' Rebels had won the title the year before by blowing out Duke in the championship game by 30. And now they returned pretty much everyone. Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, Greg Anthony, Anderson Hunt, they were all back and they were going to win it again. They blasted through the regular season. They were pounding on teams in their conference. Then they got to the tournament and they just kept beating up on people. They beat Montana by 34. They scraped by Georgetown by 8, but they beat Utah by 17. They beat Seton Hall by 12. And now UNLV found themselves facing the same Duke squad in the Final Four. Well, this would just be another 30-point blowout, right? UNLV head coach Jerry Tarkanian, he knew in 91, hey, this Duke team is different. For one, Duke has heard for the past year how you got blown out in the championship. It wasn't even close. But Duke returned everyone too. Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Thomas Hill, Brian Davis. Oh, and by the way, they also had a young, really talented freshman by the name of Grant Hill. And Duke had gotten much tougher over the past year. They got UNLV into a dogfight, and late in the game, it would be the Runnin' Rebels that didn't quite know what to do in the clutch. Am I going to shoot it? Are you going to shoot it? Do we drive? Do we take the 3? What do we do? We haven't been in this situation. Duke escapes with a 79-77 win and ended the run of the Rebels. Now, the Gonzaga Bulldogs are going to be the big favorite in the tournament this year. They will most likely be undefeated and the top overall seed. So when we look at our list today, could any of this apply to Gonzaga? I mean, could they get out coached like Houston did in 83? I doubt it. Mark Few is as good a coach as anyone in the country, so I don't see that happening. Could they face maybe a little bit tougher team like Kansas did in 97? Well, I mean, that's possible. Gonzaga's pretty tough themselves, though. Could they be a victim of a perfect game like Georgetown was in 85? Again, it's possible, but perfect games are tough to come by too. Could Gonzaga suffer an injury that would change them drastically like Indiana did in 75? Man, I hope not. I really hope not. I hate seeing injuries. That would be absolutely terrible. But could Gonzaga be the victim of playing in a less competitive conference like UNLV did in 91 and then not quite know what to do when they get in a tight game, which, by the way, they haven't been in since like December? Yeah, I mean, Gonzaga hasn't been in a tight game recently. The Zags are going to be the team to beat, but we also know anything can happen in March Madness, and I absolutely can't wait to get to March Madness since we missed it last year. I am absolutely looking forward to the tournament this year. Hey, next week on The Dose, we will be getting back to our regular format, and we will be breaking down all that we have learned in the sports world over the past week or so. You know we're going to have to take a deep dive on that NCAA tournament. So make sure you stop by The Dose and make sure you let a friend know to do the same. Hey, I want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you for listening to the Daly Dose every week. Thank you for the emails. Thank you for the texts. Thank you for the tweets. Thank you for going over to DailyDoseSports.com and checking out the new things going up there every week. But more than anything, thank you for sharing the show, for sharing the videos, for sharing the articles with someone that you know. We absolutely love it when you do that. I have to say thank you to Jess P. Could not do any of this without you. I will see you all next Wednesday. Have a great week, everybody.